All right, Denver Broncos Mile High View. No commercials, no bullshit. Okay, let's get into it. This is going to be a 2, maybe 3-part segment called Broncos Coaching Past, Present, Future. And I want to start off with the past and talk about some of the failures in the coaching. Number one, I've spent a lot of time already on Mike fucking Shanahan and why he's the Jeff Fisher of the NFL, and there is not one team pining for him, nor should they. The guy has an ego the size of Montana. It's basically, to me, a recipe for disaster. It'd be a cancer back in the organization. But I do want to say something first. Before we talk about the coaches here, before I talk about the coaches, I am going to preface this whole coaching change with this idea that, in my opinion, nothing really is going to change in Denver until there's an owner, until there's a good owner who would put a leash on whoever is in charge, the president, the Joe Ellis's, who can put, say you can't just blow out the budget with stupid decisions. You're going to be held accountable. With that said, okay, we're going to look at coaching, past, present, and future of the Denver Broncos. So we had the Mike Shanahan, then we had Josh McDaniels. And Josh McDaniels brought us Mike McCoy. Mike McCoy was to me, a disaster as a offensive coordinator and head coach. I don't think. I think as an offensive coordinator, as a quarterbacks coach, the guy was fine. But so McCoy, he's again in this way of thinking, I guess, that was in Denver that really didn't pan out. That brings us to present. I just want to talk about right now Bill Musgrave, just really quick, and Vance Joseph. I think a lot of potential coaches were passed over for Vance Joseph. That is a reflection on John Elway, which will, of course, will have an influence on the next coaching staff that comes in. And when we talk about coaching staffs, we're not a head coach. We're talking about coaching staffs. We're not just talking about bringing one guy in. These guys have got to find out who they're going to bring in, quarterbacks coach, offensive line coaches, because typically, not always, but typically the coaches that are in here right now, assistant coaches, they won't be around, and I don't think anybody's going to be shedding any tears. I don't know, maybe the special teams coach stays. Maybe he's done enough to retain, but again, coaches want to bring their own people in, whomever that may be, and that I think is going to weigh heavily on who the Broncos should bring in. I have my own ideas, but I'm going to go through what some of the talk radio or the mainstream believes should be the answer, which I don't agree with really any of it, but that's Broncos coaching future. Right now I'm going to be talking about the president. I want to talk about Mike McCoy, or not Mike McCoy. I want to talk about Bill Musgrave a little bit. Now he was kind of an interim guy that was given another chance. He'd been fired from place to place. But one thing he did do is he brought in Nick Foles into the mix. I think Nick Foles is an interesting conversation all in itself. He helped David Carr. I mean, he seems to be good with quarterbacks until the Denver Broncos brought in Case Keenum. And this is really where you got to wonder where the thinking is. When you bring Case Keenum in, the idea is you're going to implement what they did in Minnesota. In my opinion, Minnesota had some sort of a clue on how to use Case Keenum's abilities. It obviously Case Keenum showed. I mean, he took the team, and he had a better team obviously than the Denver Broncos around him. But he also had a coaching staff who understood how to use his abilities to get them to into the playoffs. And quite frankly, he did better than Kirk Cousins with the team. and Kirk Cousins is struggling to stay in the. I mean, there's a chance they could still get knocked out of the playoffs. So they struggle to get a wild card spot. Now I can understand it. That's not all on Kirk Cousins, and this wasn't a Kirk Cousins bashing, but we can only see what you did. You know, you sit there and say how much better somebody else is, but you got to show it on the W's and L's. But so you bring Case Keenum in, and what really doesn't make any sense is you all got together. Obviously, John Elway had a hand in this too. You decided to turn him into something he wasn't, and put him in a system that never would flourish anyway. I'm going to get back to Case Keenum, but I want to step back a little bit to last year, 2017. And again, I guess Musgrave was the quarterback's coach, but Mike McCoy, the absurdity of Mike McCoy running an offense he had no business running. He had an offensive line that was probably the league's worst, and you're designing. Well, it turned out that Bill Musgrave was overcomplicating. You bring somebody like Trevor Siemian, who you're trying to have up and coming, and if you think Tom Brady, they kept it so simple. When Tom Brady took over Drew Bledsoe, and they slowly built him, built the playbook up around him. Well, Mike McCoy had too complex of an offense. He didn't even have the personnel to run it. You had an offensive line that was probably the league's worst. So you're not going to be able to have plays. Oh, we're going to check the first read, second read, third read. That's not going to happen. That is not going to happen when your offensive line is like a turnstile, and defenders are just going through it like a hot knife through butter. Plus, you had Sanders. You had only two receivers really that were of any marquee value, and both Sanders was injured. He was hobbling around, as he always is injured at some point. But it was early on in the season, about a quarter of the way through, he got injured, and he was hobbling the whole rest of the season. Couldn't break separation, and Demaryius Thomas doesn't really require two tight end or two defenders on him either. So, and neither one even would make an effort to help the quarterback. Kind of like what we're seeing now with receivers, but these are rookie receivers. So you're running off complex offenses that had no business being run because they didn't even have the personnel to run it. So that was an epic failure both on Elway's part, the coaching Vance Joseph's part, and let's talk about Vance Joseph really quick. Ghost of Broncos coaches present. I don't know how much of an input was his, how much of an input on things was Elway's, but Elway absolutely has to share the blame for what's been going on for the last 2-3 years. Now, and this even goes back to when you look at the demise of, I call it the demise of the downfall of Peyton Manning in Denver. Again, running plays that really had no business being run because Peyton Manning wasn't the same quarterback. So why would you have them do that? Well, one could say maybe the coaches were under duress. Maybe Peyton Manning himself had a hand in that, thinking he was the quarterback he wasn't. All that together, and getting rid of Peyton Manning, you took care of that. But then you put in Trevor Siemian, which I thought was a quality back. If Trevor Siemian could have been in Bledsoe or in maybe New England shoes, where you had a team that was still a Super Bowl contending team, playoff contending team that you could build around. You had a good offensive line, you had good personnel, you had a great defense. But what they put Trevor Siemian in, and this isn't talked about, it was a horrible situation with a horrible play designer in Mike McCoy, who completely had no clue what his own player, where he was limited with his own player personnel. So that guy was doomed from the very beginning. And I am on record saying that before they got Case Keenum, I said the decision was good, but I felt that Case Keenum, by the week 5, they'd call for his head because they would not implement his abilities correctly, and they didn't. It took towards the end of the season to use the tight ends, to have them scramble around, And by that time, he was so screwed up from trying to make him a pocket quarterback, which really that wasn't who he was. And the coaches should have knew that. Elway should have knew. Elway brought him in. But they were trying to do, and again, I said Denver is the place where quarterbacks come to die. Peyton Manning, even with Kubiak, Kubiak wanted to make Peyton Manning something he wasn't. He tried to make him more like Case Keenum, rolling out of the pocket and stuff. And I don't know where the disconnect is in Broncos country anymore. So these quarterbacks get blamed for bad coaching, bad GMing, bad decision making. Okay, so this is going to lead us into coaches. Ghosts of coaches, the coaches' ghosts' future, Denver Broncos' future. It's kind of like the Christmas theme, the Christmas is past, that kind of thing. Anyway, but again, to get back with Musgrave and Case Keenum is that why didn't you, in the offseason, set this thing up where you were running something familiar to Case Keenum? Well, we knew that he was successful, and saying, okay, now we're going to make you a pocket quarterback. We're not going to do the rollouts. We're not going to give you the tight ends. It just didn't make sense to do that. I mean, they should have known Case Keenum isn't the guy that's going to put a team on his shoulder. Well, no quarterback's going to put the team on his shoulder. It's going to be, if they're told to be something they're not. You're not going to ask Phillip Rivers or Tom Brady to be the bootlegging quarterback. That's just not who they are. But for some reason, the Broncos organization feels they want to reinvent existing quarterbacks. So that's going to be very interesting, going forward. How, are they going to really get past themselves as an organization? So, at any rate, the coaching of the past hasn't been stellar by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't understand how people think it's going to be any different moving forward until there's ownership. What else about the present? One thing I'm going to say, I'm going to get into the coaching future, and I'm going to go through what the mainstream, what the talk radio, what their idea is. I have my own ideas, which is a bit out of the box, but I really wish people would comment, make a comment on, different from what you're hearing. And am I wrong? Where do we go? I mean, are we going to keep, are the Denver Broncos going to keep making the same mistakes? Based on their past experience. There's no reason to bring Shanahan in. No team's pining for him. It's just absurd. Again, if you want Jeff Fisher, get Jeff Fisher. I mean, you can get that in Shanahan. At least Jeff Fisher isn't a cancer in the. But you want your 9-7, that's fine. But where do you go after 9-7? It sure isn't Shanahan. He had his chance and he's blown it. It's over. It's time to bring some fresh legs in here. But those fresh legs, it all comes down to Joe Ellis and John Elway not having any accountability. And how much are they going to meddle with the new coaching staff? So that's coming up next. Stay tuned, part 2 of Denver Broncos Ghosts of Coaching Future.